Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today for our webinar, the Intro to M1 Part 2, Programming with ElkRP2 Software. My name is Brad. I'm in Elk Tech Support, and joining me today will be Amy Strickland, also another member of our Tech Support team. And at any time during the day, if you should have any questions, please make sure you type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. They're on the right side of your screen. We will try to get to as many of those questions as possible during the webinar. If we're unable to answer those questions, there will be a follow-up email later on next week with those and a link to the pre-recorded portion of this. All right, so the ElkRP Remote Programming Software for the M1, the cost of this software is free. It is downloadable from our support section of our website at elkproducts.com. Website does require a login, so if you'll follow that link there, elkproducts.com/request login, and sign up for that information, you'll get an email letting you know that your login has been approved. And once you're logged in, you can get the RP software, any firmware updates, as well as links to the manuals and any sort of documentation that we have available there. So take a second to look at that. Oh, sorry, webinar's not quite over yet. All right, so bear with me one second. I'm going to close this screen, and so we can get to our first screen in the RP software. There we go. Everyone should be looking at the first screen of the ElkRP programming software. When you first create your account, we'll click File and New Account. You'll fill in some information concerning the M1 system that you're programming, whether it be an M1 Gold or an Easy 8 system. You'll be asked to enter the serial number of the system and so forth. And once the information is generated for you, you'll be looking at what we call the account detail screen. Now, for the most part, this is a clerical screen. We have our account ID number here, which I've called M1 Part 2 Training. You can enter the name and address of your customer. You can also separate your RP files you can load them into different folders if you like. You may have a residential folder, a commercial folder, or so forth. So you can separate your accounts into different folders. We allow you some contact information here for your customer, their voice, fax, or email address. Also, there's a notes field here that allows you to input information concerning your customer, certain things like, do not call before 9 a.m. or customer has a large dog, or the customer's birthday or something. If you'd like to create a text message or something, to send a custom text message over their keypad, for instance. On the right hand of the screen, we're looking at the systems column, and you notice this information is grayed out at this time. This information will be filled in once you connect to the control. And an important field here is the firmware version. There may be times that if you call into tech support, we may ask you what current firmware are you running in your M1 system. One of the neat features of the M1 system is its flash memory capability, meaning that if there is a firmware update or enhancement, or if we integrated with a new partner manufacturer, we may make that available as a firmware update. Those do get published on our website, and you can download that firmware update and then flash the memory in the M1 to support that firmware update. And that's all done through the RP software. Another important field is the serial number field here. This is an 8-digit number. Now, if we're dealing with an M1 Gold system, that'll start with 0. If it's an M1 Easy 8, that serial number will start with the number 4. The system telephone number, that is if we're going to use RP to dial into a system using a modem connection, this would be the phone number that the M1's dialing into. It's the phone number that the M1's connected to. Your system URL/IP If you're on the local area network, this would be the IP address of the Ethernet module, the M1XEP. If you're connecting remotely, it would be the public IP address of the router, or it could be your host name from a dynamic DNS provider. The port number is the secure 2601. And you have your RP access code. And this RP access code is what allows this computer to connect to a specific control. By default, all the RP systems are shipped with RP access code 246801. But if you do decide to change that to some other 6-digit number so that only your computer would be able to connect to that one system, you can do so. But we would ask that you make a backup of your account, either a hard copy or back up your database, so in the event some sort of catastrophic failure, a hard drive crash or so forth, you would have a means in order to be able to retrieve that RP access code. Otherwise, if you're not able to retrieve your RP access code, there's no way to view that information through the keypad. So the system would have to be sent back to ELK to be completely factory defaulted in order to reconnect. And there is a charge with that service. Also on the account detail screen, we have the XEP setup. So if we click the XEP setup, we have about 8 tabs across the top and several here at the bottom. You notice most of these are grayed out right now. So if we were going to connect to a system, first of all, we'd have to be able to find the XEP on the local area network. And that's what the Find button does. When we click Find, RP will search the local area network for any XEP modules and return their address, which has been assigned by the router. Once we have that information, on the TCP IP Settings tab, we can name the XEP module. We can set up some other information such as the default gateway and the primary DNS server. This will be useful in other features such as email and time server and dynamic DNS provider and so forth. The Passwords tab, this allows you to set up 8 username and passwords that allow third-party, say the ELK M1 to go, or the third-party smartphone apps the ability to connect. It's just an extra level of encryption to the system. Under the Email tab, this allows you to set up your email service provider so that you can have the M1 send out emails or text notification during certain events. The Central Station tab, the M1 XEP module does have the capability of sending alarm signals over the internet to a supported receiver. And those supported receivers are the SureGuard 3 and the Osborne Hoffman 2000E receivers from your Central Station. The Dynamic DNS tab, if you do not have a static public IP address for your router, which in most cases you won't unless you pay for that service from your internet service provider, you'd want to sign up for a host name through one of the dynamic DNS providers. And this information will be entered here into the Dynamic DNS tab with the host name that you've created, username and password, and then if you want to be emailed reports if the update fails and so forth. The M1 does have a built-in real-time clock, but if you'd like to set up a time server feature so that you know that the M1's time is within a couple seconds of a national time server, you can do so under the Time Server tab. Now we do ask that you use a non-pool time server. And if you click on this link here, you'll get some additional information on time servers available in your area. This is by country, so be careful when you're scrolling through the list and make sure you're in the US or whatever country you're in and select a time server near you. and then the time of day to perform the update. I would suggest early in the morning, say around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, to have the system update the time for you. Under the Audio tab, the M1 does have capability of sending generic audio commands to Rust Sound, Proficient, and Nuvo. If you visit our website under Partner Manufacturers, you can view a list of the specific equipment the M1 is compatible with. So this is a brief overview of the XEP setup, which is included on the account details screen. In the upper left-hand corner, you see a Windows tree. The first item under is Users. If we click on the plus symbol to expand this open, we'll see User 1. This one is currently default in the system. We can double-click on User 1 to expand it open, and we see User 1's name is currently User 1. So at this time, we can highlight User 1 and change the name. Say, for instance, John Smith. His user code is 3456. If we scroll down to areas, the M1 is capable of 8 separate areas, and in this case, John Smith's code 3456 is valid in all 8 areas. His code allows him the ability to arm, disarm, bypass zones, and he is a master user. If we would like to create more users in the M1 system, because the M1 will support up to 199 users, highlight the word user, then right-click and create a new user. In our new dialog box, we'll have the number of users to create, 1 user, starting at the first available user location, which in this case is 2. So we click OK. And do we want to use custom values or copy from another user? In this case, I'd like to use custom values. Tell ElkRP OK. And now we have our user 2. Once again, username, Jane Smith. Her code is 1234. I'll say her code is valid in area 1 only, and she can arm and disarm the system. So it's real easy to set up users within the RP software. Once again, highlight users, right-click, create a new user, select a number of users to create, starting at either the next available, in this case it would be number 3, or you can jump to another location and start your user code. And once again, we do support up to 199 users. So this is a brief overview of the account details screen and the user screen. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amy unless we have some questions, and she's going to go over some information, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Thank you, Brad. It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time. We are recording this webinar, and we will provide a link to that recording as well as some other resources that are helpful to you in the follow-up email. So if you're looking for that to maybe share with your colleagues, that will come in a follow-up email Monday or Tuesday of next week. So Brad's gone over users, and he's talking about the different areas that a user could be assigned to. So now we'll just jump right into areas. If we click on areas, we can see an overview of the area settings that we have for our existing area, which is area 1. We can create a new area by right-clicking on areas, choosing new area, and you'll see this is similar to the screen that Brad was showing us for the users as far as creating new things in ElkRP. We can decide how many areas we want to create. So let's say we want to create 2 new areas, and we're going to start at area 2. So then we click OK on that. Now it's going to ask us if we want to use custom values or copy from an existing area. Here we will select custom values and then just click OK. And so now you can see we have area 2 and area 3 added to our list here. So there's a place for you to put in a name for the area, and if you choose to show that on the keypad, you would see this name on the keypad. So we're just going to call this guest house, since this is area 2. You have options here for your entry and exit delay timers, and those are associated with zone definitions, and again we'll put that piece together for you here in just a moment when we get to zones. But you have an exit 1 and an exit 2 time, and entry 1 and entry 2 time, and so that way you can have certain doors have a shorter or longer delay. So say for instance a garage door is a good example where you may want to have a little bit more time to get to the keypad to disarm the system than you do say for the front door. So you can make that selection on your zone, and then it's going to follow these different timers. There are some arming options available for each area. One option is the auto stay mode after exit time if no violation. What that means is if you have that selected and you arm the system to away mode, but you do not violate an entry-exit zone, the system assumes that you did not leave and it changes to stay mode automatically. And so that can help prevent false alarms. If you happen to arm the system in the incorrect mode, the system's going to recognize you didn't leave and take care of that for you. So that's an option that you can enable. Restart exit timers. This allows you to basically, after the system has been armed, you can press the exit key and it will restart the exit timer. And so an example of when you may need that is, say you've already left, you've armed the system, you open the door, go out, close the door, and then you realize I'm going to need my umbrella today. So you could come back in, press the exit key one time, and it would start the timer over. And that's only going to work one time. Once you do that, it's not going to continue to allow you to restart that timer. But that keeps you from having to disarm the system and rearm it in a case like that. So the keypad can sound after a closing report if you'd like for that to happen. And then we also have single and double key press quick arm. So these quick arm options relate to the exit and stay keys on the keypad. If you want those keys to be able to arm the system without the addition of an entry of a user code, then you can select either single or double press depending on how you want it to function. Now if you want the user to have to put in their code to arm the system, then you can uncheck these options and have neither one of these options enabled so that a code is required. The stay key actually scrolls through different arming modes, and you can see those on the screen here. You have stay, stay instant, night, and night instant. Now some customers may use all of those different arming modes, but others may not. So to make the system customized and user-friendly, you can choose which of these options the stay key will scroll to. And you can also choose to allow the stay key to change if it's armed. So that's good if you have the system armed in stay mode and your user also uses night mode, which again is associated with the zone definition that we'll get to in just a moment. But if you are armed in stay mode, it's time to go to bed, you want to arm to night mode, instead of having to disarm the system and then arm in night mode, if you have this stay key change option selected, you would just be able to press the stay key to change the arm mode, which is very convenient for the user. So if your user, say, doesn't use night mode at all, you can uncheck that option. The difference between stay and stay instant, and this is also going to apply to night and night instant, the instant mode eliminates the entry delay even on zones that are programmed to have it. So if you have it armed in stay mode, then you're going to get an entry delay on your entry exit zone. But if you have it armed to stay instant, you will not. It will create an instant alarm, again, even though that zone is programmed for a delay. Click on areas and you again can get an overview of all of your areas. And now that we have a few different areas in the system, you can see how this would give you a quick view of your different arm modes and timers and whatnot. Alright, so now let's talk about keypads. Again, by clicking on keypads, you're going to get this kind of overview of what's going on. Right-click on keypads to create new keypads. And again, you can choose how many to create and where you want to start. whether to copy from an existing or to use custom values. And you'll see that these things are very similar as we progress through the software, so once you kind of get the hang of one thing, it's going to apply to others. So now you see I've added 3 additional keypads to the system here. So we can give the keypad a name. Let's just say this is the master bedroom. Here we can choose what area the keypad is assigned to. So we just set up our different areas. We may want to set this keypad in a different area, so that's where you can make that selection. The keypad is assigned to a single area, and that is the area that it will operate. There is not an option for the keypad to be global and control all areas or be assigned to multiple areas. We do have a menu in the keypad that will allow you to temporarily set the keypad to another area. That's menu 0. And so you can, your user can navigate to that menu, select the area that they want to view, and then the keypad will display information for that temporary area. Allow them to arm and disarm the system, bypass zones, all the things that you would normally be able to do with the keypad at that area. Then once you walk away from the keypad and you've stopped pressing buttons on it, after 60 seconds it will revert back to its permanently assigned area. With the exception of our arming station, each keypad that we offer, we've got like 5 different keypads that have this option, will have a zone and an output available. So you've got a zone input and a 12 volt 50 milliamp voltage output available off of the keypad harness. The address of the keypad is going to directly assign that zone and that output number based on that address. So we can see on the screen here we have our keypad 2, and it has zone 194 assigned to it. This also means it has output 194 assigned to it, and that output can be controlled through rules. So you could be doing something like maybe controlling a door lock or integrating with the garage door. These things you could add a relay to that voltage output to allow you to control those sort of things. Or if you just want maybe some kind of LED indicator, that sort of thing, you've got 50 milliamps there that you can use to drive a device like a relay or an LED. We have some options here related to the sounds and the display of the keypad. So we can choose for a keypad to be silent on entry or silent on exit, and those are separate options. So this keypad being in a master bedroom, I do not want to hear exit delays, but I do want to maybe hear the entry delays. So you can choose that if you wanted to have both of those delays suppressed. And again, we're talking about the beeps that the keypad produces when those delays are running. You can suppress those. You can also choose for a keypad to not chime. Now each keypad has a chime button to turn the chime on and off, but that controls the chime for that entire area, not just for that keypad. So if you have a keypad that maybe you don't want to chime even when the chime feature's turned on and you're hearing those sounds from other keypads or from the voice part of the system, you can choose to have this keypad not produce those tones. If you want the keypad to go completely dark, and again, this being a master bedroom, that's a good option for this keypad, you can set the LEDs off 60 seconds after no activity, and that's going to make the backlight of the LCD as well as all the backlighting for the keys go dark 60 seconds after your last button press. Relating to the backlight, we do have a setting here that sets the intensity of the backlight. Now when you press a button, you're going to illuminate the keypad to full brightness, but it can go back to this setting after a few seconds to have a more dim display, which is good in some cases and desirable by your customer. So that's customizable for you there to set the different backlight levels. I was referring to before like the area name and displaying that on the keypad, so you can see here's where that option exists for you to show the area name or choose not to. You've got some other options as far as like showing the date and time. You can choose to have that displayed or turn it off. And certain models of keypads, the M1KP and the M1KPB, which are larger keypads, have a built-in temperature sensor, and so with those keypads you would see this option available where you could choose to show that temperature, and it would be displayed as the inside temperature. The bypass key on the keypad can require a user code if you select this option. And then we have some other options here related to the tone. So that the key beep tone just changes the pitch of the beeps when you're pressing the keys on the keypad, so that you can have that be a higher or lower pitched tone. You also have a volume setting here that allows you to adjust how loud the sound is from the beep feedback and chime and that sort of thing. And you can turn all of the sounds off for a keypad completely by setting this to 0. But keep in mind that's going to eliminate any audible feedback from key presses, that sort of thing. The keypad will not produce any sounds if you have it set to 0. Now this section below here relates to the F keys on the keypad, and you can see with this keypad it has F5 and F6 grayed out. The software at this point is assuming this is a keypad that does not have those keys. Several models of keypads have the option for 6 function keys, while some have 4. So that's why you see these 6 options, but these 2 are grayed out, again assuming that it's one that only has 4 buttons on it. So these buttons can be used for like panic buttons. You see here the default programming, fire, police, and medical for your F1, 2, and 3. These can also be used to perform other functions like automation tasks or have rules written to tell the button what to do when it's pressed. So we're just on our F4 key here. If we go through our drop-down list, you can see we have a lot of different options here, and I'm just going to pick Automation Task 1 for button 4. Later on, Brad will show us how to define what Automation Task 1 does. The illumination event drives when the key lights up. So this F key can perform the functions that you're wanting there. You can see with those panic keys, that key's going to light up when that particular type of alarm occurs. But we can have that follow the state of a zone, the arm state of an area, the state of an output, all different kinds of things that we can have this key backlight of the key follow. So I'm just going to have this follow output 3, which is our Form C relay on board. So whenever output 3 is on, the key is going to light up. Now if I wanted to really draw attention to that, let's just say that that's maybe a garage door, and we want to have that following the zone so that we know when the garage door is open. We could choose to have that light blink so that it really draws attention when that door is open. If you want the key to light up in the opposite, as I said with the output, the key's going to light up when the output's on. Maybe you want that key to light up when the output's off instead. That fits your application and that's what you need. You can choose invert light. By default, these keys require a press and hold or a double press to activate. But if it's not like a panic key and you want to make it easier for the user, you can choose for that to be single press. You've also got the option here for the key to require a code. If you want that particular function key to be more secure, you can require a code to be entered before its function is performed. We have a place here for a name. Now the name will be displayed on the keypad when the key is pressed, which is just a helpful visual indication for the customer that they did activate the function that they wanted. Or if you're using the press and hold or the double press, it's going to show up so that they know, okay, this is what's going to happen if I press this button again. It's going to activate this particular function. So I'm just going to name this one Garage Door for now. You can see all the different keypads that we have here. When we click on keypads, we get that overview and you can see the different programming. And you can scroll over here to see like all of your function keys. It has all that information available for you. Okay, so now let's talk about zones. If we look under zones, we already have our hardwired main board and the 16 zones that are available from the M1 Gold. So let's just double click on Zone 1 and take a look at that. So here we can name the zone. Zone 1 really doesn't tell the customer what that is, so we can be much more specific here, and let's just say, Zone 1 is the front door. And we want that to be an entry-exit 1 zone, but let's just say again that maybe this was the garage door and we want to have that longer period of time. We can choose the entry-exit 2. You've got perimeter instant for doors that you do not want to have a delay, or glass break sensors, that sort of thing. A number of different interior definitions here for like your motion detectors, that sort of thing. So burglar interior is your just basic definition there, but then there are some other definitions, and I'll go over these with you. Follower, definition 5 here, interior follower, means that if an entry-exit zone is violated first, the motion detector, or the interior zone here, will follow that entry-exit delay. If that motion detector were to be tripped without an entry-exit zone being violated first, then that would produce an instant alarm. So this just allows it to follow the entry-exit delay. As we were talking about earlier in the areas portion, you've got your different arm modes, stay instant, night, and night instant. So in stay and stay instant, none of your interior zones are active. So if it has interior in this name of the definition, then it's not going to be active at all in stay mode or stay instant mode. However, you may want to have some parts of the interior armed at night while you're sleeping, like maybe the whole entire lower level, or just certain parts armed so that you have more security at night while you're sleeping. So that's where the night definitions come in, and we have interior night, which again would be not inactive in stay mode, not active in stay mode, but would be active in night mode. Then we also have interior night delay, which is again going to be active in night mode and produce a delay, but would not be active at all in stay mode. And all of the interior zones are active in away mode. We have some more burg definitions here, fire, auxiliary. These auxiliary definitions will not produce any kind of audible or visual alarm indication. However, they will log the data that they were when they're tripped, and also could be reported. And then you can write rules if you want to have some other action based on those. Key fob applies to wireless key fobs, and I'll go over that in just a bit. And you can see we have several different standard zone definitions here. We have key switch zones available, and we also have power supervisory zones, temperature zones. The temperature zones apply to our zone temperature sensors. So if you have zone temperature sensors, they do need to be on the main board. You would select temperature here, and you would also need to select fast loop response. And then analog zones can be manipulated through rules based on the reading that's coming in on that zone. You can have that trigger different events. For the attributes, a lot of these are self-explanatory, but I'll just hit on each one of them briefly. Silent alarm, again, is going to suppress any audible indication of the alarm occurring. A zone can use a dialer delay, and I'll show you where you would set the delay here in just a moment, but that's just going to allow it to wait before it actually dials out for alarm, and you can also have like an abort and a cancel associated with that for your reporting. We have two-way listen-in capability with the M1 Gold, and if you would like for this zone to be able to initiate a listen-in session, you would choose listen-in here. Bypassable just means the system's going to ignore that zone if it's been bypassed. Now that differs from force arming. In force arming, the system would be allowed to arm with the zone in a violated state. However, as soon as that zone goes back to normal, it's back in the alarm loop, whereas a zone that is bypassed is going to be ignored completely until it's unbypassed. The force arm allows you just to arm, but then, it's say a garage door. You can arm the system with the garage door up, back your car out, the door closes, and now the door is also armed. Swinger shutdown just prevents the zone from being able to create multiple alarms to keep it from being a runaway to your central station. If the zone is repeatedly tripped, it's only going to be able to send in 2 signals. Periodic trip means that in a disarm cycle, the zone must be violated. And so let's just say, for instance, you have a motion detector in a warehouse and it's gotten a huge stack of boxes piled up in front of it. That motion detector is not really doing you any good in your security. So if you have a situation like that, you can set this periodic trip, and that would mean that the system couldn't be armed until that zone had been violated during that disarm cycle. So that's going to make someone go take a look at that zone and see what's going on with it. Fast loop response, that just determines how quickly the system's going to respond to the zone, and I'll show you where those timers are here in just a moment. We can choose to have chime enabled on zones or disabled, so maybe you want chime on your doors but you don't want it on the motion detectors because that's just going to get on your nerves. You can choose to turn that off for certain zones. And then we have in cross zone pool. That means that if you have two zones in the cross zone pool, they have to both be tripped within a certain period of time before they can create an alarm. You can also have the zone set up for self-verify, meaning that the zone itself would have to be tripped twice in order to create an alarm. And these are just things that kind of help with false alarms. The M1 Gold does have the voice capability to make those on-site announcements, and say like you've got the chime in one of the voice modes. Again, Zone 1's not going to really tell your customer a whole lot about what's going on, so here you can put in a description to let them know what's going on or which zone is violated. So as you can see there, you can just start typing a word and the list will show you, words that match what you've typed in thus far. So now we could say, is open, or we could just leave it at front door, but you do have some options here to insert a variable like open or closed. To create more zones, we again would select zones, right click on it and choose new hardwired or new wireless zones depending on what type you're trying to create. I'm going to go ahead and set up new wireless zones, and this is going to ask me what group I want to set up. So I'm going to go ahead and set up groups 2 here, which is 17 through 32. And now you can see I have these wireless zones. Now they're all going to be disabled by default. You have to go in and program these zones so that the system knows how to look after them. So let's just take a quick look here at zone 17. We could say again that this is a key fob, for instance, wireless key fob, and then we'll select that definition we saw earlier for key fob, which is 15. We can choose which options we want this to have. It being a key fob, I really don't need any of these particular attributes selected, but with any zone you have all of these same options. Same option for voice description, although again with a key fob that's not really going to be relevant. But what I want to do here is take you into wireless setup and just go over some of these things. So we have the supervision, which for most zones is going to be normal supervision. For a key fob, you would want to set it to not supervised. If this were a smoke detector, we would want to set it to fire supervision. So I'm going to go ahead and choose not supervised there. We can select for key fobs the ID that we want it to have. So let's say this is James key fob. We're going to go ahead and make that user 2. Now here you have your TXID, your DL, and your HID fields. These are all places where you can put in the ID number. Now which field you choose to enter the ID number in is going to be directly related to the type of wireless that you're working with. There are 3 options for wireless with the M1. You have the ELK two-way wireless, the GEITI format, and the Honeywell 5800 series. And we have 3 different products in our product line to support those 3 wireless options. So with the ELK two-way wireless, you're going to enter your ID number under TXID. For the GEITI format, you would either enter it in TXID or DL depending on how the device is labeled. And for Honeywell, you're going to enter it under the HID field here in the 5800 series box. Now, the loop number applies to the Honeywell sensors as well as the ELK two-way wireless sensors. So this will tell the system, what part of the sensor is associated with the zone, or how to take care of that zone in the wireless setup. This is not used by the GE ITI format. Instead, when you have a sensor that has multiple zone options, you're going to use option 1 and option 2 here. Option 1 for the GE ITI sensors tells the system that it does have an external contact connected to it, and option 2 specifies that that external contact is normally closed. The option for PIR here only applies to GE motion detectors. So if you have a GE ITI format motion, you want to have this box checked. If you're working with the Elk or the Honeywell, you do not need to check that box for your motions. So this wireless setup button takes us to the screen we were just looking at, which is zone-specific information. We have a different wireless setup that we can access from our folder items list here, and this gives us more information. So we have some settings here related to the receiver. These are for your supervision time windows. You'll see the defaults here for normal or 24 hours, and for fire supervision is 4 hours. The transmitters tab is where you'll see a list of all of your zones. You can see the key fob that I have set up here and the options that I selected for it. You would see all of your zones here, and this just gives you a quick overview. Double clicking there would bring you to the screen that we were looking at earlier. And what we really wanted to show you here on this screen is the key fob events tab. This is how you select what the buttons will do, and this applies to key fobs from any of the 3 wireless options that we've discussed. So by default, you've got your arm away and your disarm on buttons 1 and 2. That's default programming is going to be there, so as soon as you enable a key fob, it should be able to arm and disarm the system. But a lot of key fobs have 4 buttons, like the key fob that we offer is a 4-button key fob. So you can set the other buttons to perform other functions. Say, for instance, you want to have a panic button. Button number 4 should be a panic. Then we can go ahead and set that to police alarm, and that's going to create a panic button for us. You can also set things like an automation task here. If you wanted to have it do something like open your garage door or turn on lights, that sort of thing, and you've defined a task to do that, then you can simply apply that task to this button. You can also just write rules to tell, key fob button 3 should do this. In that case, you can just leave this as disabled. The next item in our folder items list is cutoff timers, and this is related to the length of time that the siren will go off for the alarm. Now that applies to output 1 and output 2. And you see the default settings here. For most alarms is 600 seconds or 10 minutes. For fire, this value that we see here, this 65535, basically is infinity for the M1. This fire alarm is going to go off until someone goes in and acknowledges it. There are some cases, like say with a medical alarm, where the siren going off would be undesirable. So in those cases, you can actually set that down to 1 second, and you're not going to hear the siren at all. You're still going to see the alarm on the keypad. The keypad will still beep. It will still be logged and reported, and all of the normal things that happen, with the exception of the siren. So that's how you can suppress that. You do not want to set that to 0, as that would have an adverse effect on the operation of the system. So if you don't want to hear the siren for a certain type of alarm, set it down to 1 second. Now we have the globals, and there's a lot of information here in the globals. We could probably spend an hour talking about just globals, so I'm just going to hit on some of the high points for you, some of the things that you may want to look at or more commonly would need to adjust in globals. The first thing here being the telephone remote control. The M1 Gold does have that feature built in where you can either use phones on-site or remotely to dial in and interface and control the system with the touch tones. So if you want to have that enabled, you do need to set that to either to local or local and remote. You've got some display options here as far as how date and time would be displayed, temperature would be displayed if it's a keypad that would be doing that for you. Daylight savings time settings for areas that observe daylight savings time, you can turn that on and off. You've got an option here to set the country that you're in for the telephone interface. On the Zones tab here is where we find those loop response times, and again this relates to that checkbox option for fast loop response. If that's selected, it's going to have a 40 milliseconds response time, whereas if it's not, it's going to have a 400 milliseconds response time. This is also where you see those cross-zone options. If you want to allow cross-zone self-verification, you can check this box. And then this is the time window that you have for your cross-zoning. The audible system troubles box here relates to the keypad beeps for things like AC failure, low battery, phone fault. So if you don't want those beeps to occur, you can uncheck this box. Those messages will still be displayed on the keypad, still logged, reported, that sort of thing. It's just going to prevent beeping, which if you have, say, like a situation where that's beeping is going to keep your customer up at night, it can be really good to have that turned off. On the Output 1 tab here, we have some volume settings, initial alarm versus your maximum voice and maximum siren alarms. That allows the system to start at a lower level when it's in alarm and just ramp up slowly over time to that maximum volume that you have set here, so kind of a peacemaker for your neighbors. Then we also have non-alarm voice, and so that's going to be things like your chime messages, arm, disarm messages, that sort of thing. You can turn the voice features on and off here by category, or you can disable the voice altogether if that's something that you're not going to use. So you have those options as well. And then I just want to hop over here to the Special tab. Now there's a lot going on this screen. If you're going to be using the telephone remote control, then you need to have the rings until auto answer set to some value so that the system can answer the phone. If you have like an answering service or answering machine, you want to be able to get around that. There is the ring hang up answer feature. That allows you to dial into the system, let it ring once or twice, hang up, dial back in. It's going to pick up on the first or second ring to get around that voicemail or that answering machine. Our baud rate for serial port 0, which is the main serial port on board. You see here is the default setting. That will work for most everything, but if you do find that you need to change that, you do have that option. And you also want to make sure for your third-party apps and software, that sort of thing, that you have all of these options selected so that you're getting all of the data out of that serial port. And here's where you're going to find your Keypad programming code or local programming code to get you into the installer level menus of the Keypad. So if you want to change that from the default, you can do that here, but just like the RP access code, as Brad was cautioning earlier, if you do choose to change that value, it is very important that you document it so that if you do have some kind of issue with your computer, you would have some record of what you had changed that to. Telephones is where we set up our central station, and also if you want the system to call somebody and give them a message, you can do that here. So again, to create telephones, we right click on telephones and choose new telephone. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly set up 3 telephones here, starting at telephone 1. And this first one is going to be our central station, so we can just put in our central station number here, and again this is a fake number as you can see, so don't try to call that number, but you would set the reporting format here. Let's just say it's contact ID, your dial attempts, the different things that you want it to report. So I don't really want to report bypasses, but I do want to report troubles on my zones, so you can select those options here. You have a place to put in your account number. If your account number is a 4-digit number, you would need to enter 00 and then your 4 digits. You do have to enter all 6 digits in that field for it to work correctly. We're going to set this as an always report, but we also want to have a backup. So we're going to go to telephone 2 and we're going to set this as our central station backup, and maybe this is a local number, and we want to report in a different format or the same format. You can select these different options, again wanting to report the troubles and entering your account number. So once you've entered all of this information for both telephones, then we can tell telephone 2 to be a backup to telephone 1 by selecting 1 as the type here. And you see when I do that, all of this information is grayed out. It's locked in now, and you'll notice telephone 1 is also grayed out. These two are locked in. To make any changes to either one of them, we would have to set this one back to an always report. And we're going to make this Jane's cell phone. And again, totally fake number here. So we want to maybe give Jane some voice notifications of non-alarm related things. We can set this here as voice message. You'll notice all of that central station related information just goes away when you do that, and we have to write rules to activate that. So Brad will show us that here in just a moment. Related to our reporting is this communicator section. You see we have 5 different categories here. I'm just going to hop into zone RCs and you can see all the different zones that are set up. You have alarm, restoral, bypass, and trouble. Those are the 4 things that a zone can report. So by default in the M1, the alarm reporting code is already enabled with the 0, 1 in this pulse column. And the troubles are enabled here too. Let's just say we did have a zone where we wanted to report a restoral. We can enter 0, 1 there, and you'll see that that fills in the contact ID and SIA fields for us. Let's say we wanted to report restorals for all of the zones. If you right-click on Pulse, then you can set them all to 0, 1 or clear them all to 0, 0 so that you don't have to go into each and every field and do that. So that's a quick tip for you there. So area RCs, you're going to find your dialer delay that we spoke about before, your cancel window, so you can set these time frames and then also associate those with an abort or a cancel reporting. You also find your duress reporting code here, as well as a few other things. If you want to report user opening and closings, you have a place here to enable that for each user. System RCs is where you find your AC fail, your automatic test, so you can choose here how long before the system recognizes an AC failure and reports it. And then you would also want to have these reporting codes enabled if you're going to be doing reporting on AC failure. If you want to have the system tested periodically, let's just say every week, we can choose to test automatically every 7 days. We can choose the time of day we want that test to occur. Let's just say that's 3 a.m. every 7 days. And then we'd also need to enable the automatic test reporting code. You also find things like your output 2 trouble, low battery, that sort of thing here. And then as we were talking about those keypad panics earlier, there's a tab here for each keypad, and if you do have those enabled for panics, then you can turn the reporting on here. And again, I could do that very easily just by setting that to 0, 1 on all of those, and that's going to enable reporting for those panic keys. So that's the basics of the security part of the system that you can program from the software, and the vast majority of what you've seen here, short of the voice parts of the system, could be also programmed from the keypad. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Brad, and he's going to go into the automation section.
All right, thanks Amy, appreciate that. Do we have any questions so far?
It doesn't look like we have any questions so far, other than we are recording this webinar and we will provide a link to that recording in our follow-up.
All right, very good, excellent. All right, so once again, continuing on the left-hand side of the screen, our last option here is automation. There's a lot going to be happening under automation. So we click on automation, and the first thing that we look at is task. So when we click on the task button here, we notice we have a number of different tasks that we could name, 1 through 32 different tasks. Now in this screen here, we're simply assigning a name to a task, and I think we set up a garage door earlier, so we'll call this garage door. Now the show column here allows this name, garage door, to show up on the ELK keypad as well as some third-party apps, including the M1 to go. And you can assign a voice description to the task, which can be used through the telephone remote control option. And like I said, all this is assigning a name. Later on, we'll have to create a rule that would activate upon this task being activated. So right now, this is just assigning a name. So under task, we assign names. Under lighting control, the M1 has the capability of integrating with a number of different lighting control manufacturers and technologies. Basically, we have the capability of controlling up to 256 devices, or it could be 193 devices and 64 scenes or links. It just depends on the manufacturer of the lighting controller technology. But on this screen here, depending on the manufacturer or the technology, we could come in here and we could assign a name to a specific light, and this may be the front door. The format, for the most part, the first options here are related to what's called some power line carrier X10 technology. The last one here is probably the one you'll use more often, and that's this serial port expander, because that's generally how we integrate with most of our partner manufacturers, is through our serial port expander. And then the type of device, which could be an on-off switch or a dimmer or an appliance module. The op box here is for Insteon lighting only. So if you're not using Insteon, this option will not be checked. The show box, once again, that allows this front door name to appear on the Elk keypad or the third-party apps. And then we have a voice description you can assign to each light as well, and that can be used through the telephone remote control to give a voice description to the light, and you can activate it upon entering into that menu. Now, for certain manufacturers of lighting technology, we do offer the capability of importing this data. So if you right-click on lighting, you can import lighting data. And you can see here, these are the file formats that we support for importing this information. This is the Universal Devices ISY import for Insteon lighting. We also support Upstart file, the CBus, and the Lutron Radio Raw XML data bus. You can import these information directly into your RP software and then send it down to the M1 system. Under outputs, you have the capability of assigning a name to the first 64 outputs in the system. The system does support 205 outputs. Output 1 and 2 are hard-coded in the system, so typically you could not use those in rules. There is one exception for output 2 in that you can chirp the siren. So for instance, we can I can rename this to outside siren. And I may not want to show that, but output 3 we're going to assign to the garage door. I do want that to show. And I want to assign a voice description if I wanted to. I could do so here. Like I said, you can name the first 64 outputs within the system, and then after that it's simply output 65, 66, all the way up to 208. Under the sunrise sunset setting, the M1 system does have the astronomical clock, so we do know when it's sunrise and sunset and so forth, but in order for the M1 to know that, you would have to select a city or enter the latitude and longitude of your area. So we give the option to select a city. In this case, we're going to select Chapel Hill, North Carolina here. So I'm going to use these settings. And now the system has calculated the sunrise and sunset time for this system here that's going to be located in Chapel Hill. And we can write our rules that whenever sunrise or sunset, have the system do different things, and it'll automatically compensate based upon daylight savings time and so forth. So that's what sunrise and sunset settings are all about. Under the voice tab, there's a lot going on under the voice tab, and you can actually go into these menus and you can manipulate some of the voice descriptions that the M1 speaks. So we have system messages and keypad and so forth. Like I said, you can go in and manipulate these if you want to. You can have the system speak different messages. The one I would probably not recommend manipulating would be the phone control, because this is when you call into the system to access the voice prompts and so forth. If you manipulate those and get them out of order of some way, then the system may not respond in the way you would like it to. So I would not manipulate these. I would probably leave these as they are. One area that you may want to enter into will be the system miscellaneous, because here we have 10 miscellaneous messages that you can customize. Double click on it and you can use the drop down to select different messages and write rules and so forth to have those speak. Now the M1 does have the capability of having 10 6-second locations recorded directly into the board using a house telephone as a microphone. There's additional information on the setup and configuration on page 19 of the M1 installation manual, but it uses a house phone as a microphone. You can custom record your own message if it's something that a specific word or phrase or something that's not currently in the vocabulary. You have that option there to create your own. That would be your voice or a nice pleasant female voice or something along those lines, but it would be your recorded voice that would be spoken through output 1 on the M1. Alright, so that covers voice here. Custom settings. When we create rules in the M1 system, we can assign custom settings to certain variables, and those variables can be adjusted through Keypad programming. So if we set up a rule that's based upon a time of day or the amount of time a relay turns on, we can assign that to a custom setting. And then once you've disconnected RP and you've left, you've gone on to another job, if for instance your customer decides that whatever the time value is for that relay is either too long or too short, that is a setting that they can adjust through the keypad. It wouldn't require you to reconnect or go back on site, and then they can manipulate that setting to meet their needs. For instance, if it's an irrigation system, we're watering the lawn and so forth, you may have certain times of the day that the system controls the solenoids. Well, they may want to adjust that time of day to either earlier or later. They also may need to be able to adjust the amount of time that the relay stays on. So these are custom settings, and they're adjustable through the keypad. Under counters, we have the ability to name 64 counters. And counters do just that. You can add, subtract. You can set a counter to a specific value from 1 to 65,535. You can have the system count X number of times, and when a counter reaches a certain value, do something. You know, if it's a commercial application, the 100th person through the door that day gets us 10% off. Or we like to use counters as placeholders, as flags, as some people like to call them. So a lot of times we use an example where we toggle a counter between 0 and 1 so that we can have a single button press do two different things. For instance, we're going to just call this toggle, and we'll write a rule to do so, and I'll give you a brief example on what this toggle feature will look like. Alright, so this is counters. Under thermostats, we have the capability of integrating with, like I said earlier, with a number of different partner manufacturers for communicating thermostats, and the system will support up to 16 thermostats. So under this field here, we're simply giving a name to the thermostat, then we can use that in rules later on. Under the text area here, you can create custom text messages which can be displayed on the keypad. You can write a text message, for instance, to wish somebody a happy birthday or an anniversary, or to let them know happy holidays and so forth. You can also write custom text messages to say, you know, it's Tuesday, it's trash day, take the trash out, or have something every 30 days, change the air filter or the water filter. Just things like that, custom text messages. This is also the area if we're integrating with a piece of equipment that has that we're not currently directly integrating with, and that piece of equipment offers their RS-232 protocol. You can write these custom ASCII strings and send them out the M1 to this third-party equipment to do some generic information. It wouldn't be full integration, but in some cases on, off, or a certain set point or so forth is possible using their RS-232 protocol. Now we get to the last option in the list, and that's rules. And that's really where we set the M1 apart from most, if not all, other integration system is our rule engine. It's a very powerful rule engine, and this is what allows you to create those life enhancements or automation or just whatever you want to do to help provide integration, quality of life improvements to your customers. So to get started, a rule is basically considered we start with a whenever, and that's an event. Now what could that whenever be? Well, that whenever can be a time occurrence, every day at a certain time, at sunrise, at sunset, whenever the hour equals or the minutes equal, every X number of hours or minutes, even every second you could have something take place within the M1 system. It could also be whenever a zone changes state, whenever it becomes secure or not secure. We can write rules based upon an output changing state, whether it turns on or turns off. We can write rules for the function keys on the keypad. We can write rules based upon the key fob function keys, whether or not a light changes state either by the M1 or the light itself, if it's capable of broadcasting its change in status. Automation task. We can have the system respond to it becoming armed, disarmed, going into alarm, whenever the entry or the exit delays start or stop, based upon alarms turning on or cutting off. Let's get back there. Any alarm that the M1 can generate can be an input or a whenever statement to a rule. You can have rules based upon trouble conditions, AC fail, low battery, as well as those conditions restoring. Sending and receiving those custom text messages, whenever those counters change or expire, and whether or not the thermostat settings have been changed. So a rule must start with one whenever. You can only have one whenever within a rule. We have the AND statement, which are optional. These are conditioning statements. And like I said, they are optionals. You do not have to have an AND statement, but an AND statement can be based upon a time of day, whether it's relative to a specific time of the day or sunrise or sunset. Even the number of days in the month itself, whether it's light or dark outside based upon your sunrise and sunset settings, whether a zone is secure or not secure, whether an output is on or off. Last user was. So if the system disarms and we want to know if it was Jane Smith, then send John Smith a text message. Whether a light is on or off state, based upon whether or not the system is armed or disarmed or in alarm, those miscellaneous troubles. Has a counter reached a certain value? Is the temperature sensor above or below a certain set point? Has the thermostat changed state? These are all conditioning AND statements, optional AND statements, and you can have multiple AND statements within one rule, but they all must be true before it'll execute the next line. Now once we have achieved our whenever, and if we have the optional ANDs, what would we like to happen? That's the then statement within the rule. So within the then, we can control automation task, we can control the security aspects of the system, we can turn on or off outputs, we can control lighting, you can speak messages, you can send custom messages out the port, onboard serial port or through a serial port expander. You can send text to a keypad. You can enable or disable the chime feature. You can beep the keypads. You can chirp the outside siren. That's the one thing I was mentioning earlier about output 2. This is really the only time you'd interact with output 2 is being able to chirp the outside siren. Set or change those counter values. You can dial Jane's cell phone and deliver a voice message. You can send an email message. We can control the thermostat. We can enable or disable users as well as the voice capability. bypass or unbypass a zone, reset smoke power, or send generic audio commands to the 3 supported audio systems. You can have multiple then statements within a single rule. So we have one whenever, we have optional ands, and then we have the then statements. So earlier we set up, I think it was an automation task. So let's go in, let's look at whenever, and let's take a look at automation task. Now we called that task garage door, and like I said, we just named it. That's all it is right now, is just a name. So whenever automation garage door is activated, okay, what would we like to happen? Well, let's then turn output 3, which is a dry contact, to the input on the garage door controller. We're going to turn that output on for a duration. It doesn't have to be long. 1 second is usually sufficient, so we'll say we'll turn that on. Now, if it wasn't sufficient amount of time, we could have set that as a custom setting and then gone through the keypad to adjust that if it's not long enough. So right now we're going to turn output 3 on for 1 second, and this rule is basically done. So the task can be activated through the keypad menu. It can be activated through M1 to go. It can be activated through the third-party app. The function key earlier that Amy set up, let's go back under keypads. I think it was keypad 1. Maybe it was keypad 2. Yes. Automation task 1. So whoever presses the F4 key will now turn on output 3, which will illuminate for that 1 second, and now we're controlling the garage door. So that's how the tasks operate. Let me do another quick rule concerning the counters. Let's say, for instance, we had the toggle counter. So whenever, and I want, let's say, for instance, I'm going to set up another F key press, and this time it's going to be F5. Okay. I want to then look for counters, toggle. I'm going to set that counter to toggle between 0 and 1. Okay? Now this rule was done. So basically what this is doing right now, every time you press that F5 key, the first time you press it, it'll change the counter to 0. I'm sorry, change it to 1 actually, because it's already at 0. The next time you press it, it'll change it back to 0, and that process will continue. So what can we do with that? Okay, let's say, for instance, whenever, okay, look for counters. Whenever this counter 1 equals a fixed value of 0, okay, I want to then control a light. So when that, I'm going to turn this light off when that counter equals 0. Okay, that rule's done. But when that counter equals 1 now, equals a fixed value of 1, I want to turn the light on. So I'll turn that light on. Okay, so now that rule is done. But let's say, for instance, I only want that to happen at certain times of the day. So we could also edit this rule to say, okay, I want to make sure that it is dark outside. So whenever the counter changes to 1 and it's dark outside, then turn the light on. So now I have a whenever, an and a then. I could have multiple and statements here. I can have multiple then statements. For instance, I could add a then. And this may not be real-world practicality, but I think you'll get the idea that we could dial Jane's cell phone number and we could speak a message. And it could be something like miscellaneous 1, for instance. So now whenever the toggle counter changes to 1 and it's dark outside, then we'll turn the light on and we'll call Jane's cell phone and give her this message that we've created. So that one's done. So as you can see, we have the way we like to describe it, your imagination's your limitation as far as when you're creating rules. I've given you just 4 simple rules right now, but you can see that we have a number of different scenarios that we could have covered during this webinar that based upon the time of day and so forth, or lighting changes, the security aspect of it. So I'll go over one more real quick. Let's say, for instance, whenever. Let's say the system, whenever the alarm turns on. Now let's just be generic. We'll say whenever any alarm turns on, any area, okay, whenever the alarm turns on, then I want to call, oh, I didn't set up an email, I apologize. I was going to send an email, but we'll dial a phone number, we'll dial Jane again, and this time we're going to speak. So many messages to choose from. Yeah, we'll say we'll do miscellaneous number 9 this time. So whenever the alarm turns on, it'll dial Jane's cell phone and deliver this particular voice message that we've created. So now that rule's done. So you can see the programming aspect of the M1 system, very simple, very straightforward, and we've given you just a few examples today. We do have some information on our website on some applications for certain rules and so forth. So if you get an opportunity to take a look at that, please do so. And do we have any questions? I know we're about out of time right now.
We did have a question about our M1 to go software. That software is a remote control application to allow you to control the M1, so it's designed for the end user, and it is a free application that's available for download from ElkProducts.com. There are also other smartphone and tablet apps available for purchase through our third-party partners. Those are available through the respective marketplaces for those devices. I'd like to thank you for spending time with us today. We hope you got a lot out of this particular presentation, learning how to program the M1 system with our ElkRP software, and we hope that you see just how easy and flexible that software is to use, and you'll go forward feeling confident in using the software to program your next M1 installation. Brad did a great job showing us some rules examples in the period of time that we had, but if you want to dive deeper into that, as he mentioned, there are some application notes available on our website. Also on our YouTube channel you will find a recording of a previous webinar we did where that's all we talked about was rules, and we show you a bunch of different examples. So if you're just itching for some more material on rules to get your gears turning on what you can do, go to our YouTube channel. We're Elk Products Video. You can pull that up and see that webinar, as well as a number of other videos that we have to help you with programming and setting up the M1 and using it for different applications. Again, thank you for your time. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you, Brad, for being with us today and doing a great job as usual, and hope everyone has a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you, Amy.